Hey everybody, welcome to the GMG review. Today we're taking a look at A War Transformed. This is a new, I would say, company level World War I horror fantasy skirmish, not skirmish, company level war game from Osprey Games, written by Frederick Silburn Slater. And this is a full-on, probably 50 on 50 to more, including tanks, monsters, and all kinds of other gribbly, sort of like, I guess, I don't want to say mystical, but almost like folk monsters in a World War I setting. So, basic MacGuffin, I'm not going to spend too much time in the background. Moon explodes, bad things are coming out at night, the war keeps going in World War I. And this game is a 28 millimeter horror sort of folk fantasy style game set in that basic setting. It does some interesting things, and it uses squad on squad combat at scaling sizes. There isn't really a, what would I call a, like a standard game size for War Transformed. It's based on the scenario and could have everything from 10 to selection points up to like 20 to 30 selection points based on how big a game you're playing. It does ask for a variety of models and terrain. You can pick a different existing sort of like nation and faction from World War I to base stuff on, and it has a fairly simple, not points free, but fairly streamlined. It reminds me a bit of Lion Rampant or any of the Saga style games for selection systems. You have 10 points as sort of your starting place. The average 8-man unit is 2 points. You get a witch and a captain for free, and then you're spending points on everything else, selection points on everything else. It uses D6s, D3s, D10s for most of the testing, and uses a very basic stat line. So let's have a look. This is all in full cover, lovingly sort of illustrated by some artists recruited by the folks at Osprey. And it is a very complete game. This is a dense 218-page rulebook that doesn't shy away from having lots of additional rules. And one of the things I really liked about the layout, I don't sort of want to bang on too long about this, is I love all of the illustration line in here. These little, I talked about this in Fighting Fantasy when I did the reviews for the Fighting Fantasy books with Jay, but that little bit of extra attention to detail where there's sort of like some thematic stuff in here, I think is very cool. There is a sort of a theme in here, like along the lines of astrology, folk magic, and sort of like that European mythology stuff. There's some cool sort of like thematic rules, like the fact that a tanker vehicle, it's so heavy with iron, which is like inimical to fey creatures. You can't perform rituals next to it. Just little bits and pieces like that. And it's also in the art and in the layout here with like the phases of the moon. When you want to pick special abilities for your captain, it's actually based on their astrological sign, just little stuff like that. So let's jump into the core rules of the game. Have fun, roll dice. When things don't make sense, come to an agreement. Dice, like I said, you need D3s, D4s, D6s, and D10s. D6s are used for most of the management of combat. D10s are used for things like checking your zeal, which is typically also reflected in like your morale checks and stuff like that. So you're rolling a D10 when you want to roll under that. They do ask you to get some scatter dice, so old GW scatter dice will work, or they give you some ways of doing it with D6 as well. Command tokens operate a little bit like order tokens in Infinity. You want to have a command token based on the number of models in your army that aren't run away or dead, and then additional features like that. So like you're having a captain that's on the table and having an intact force, you haven't taken more than half your units in casualties. But they operate a lot like you trade them for dice, and then the number of dice that you roll for priority, like you activate units with them, but you also have to use them to gain initiative during any given phase. So you tend to like bargain and barter with them overall to try and get to do stuff. And each phase, there's 3 primary phases based on your training level, and then also the command phase. You need to save some to try and go first, but you're basically using them to also activate like your spells and rituals and abilities. So they're a commodity you're going to use throughout the turn. And then non-essential items, tarot cards can be used to track your magic spells, and then counters for things like whether or not you've taken fire and you have a combat stress marker on you and stuff like that. Now, the unit coherency is fairly unique in this. It reminds me a bit of the old unit coherency rules in Warzone, or I guess there's no unit leader in this one, so I can't say it's like the Privateer Press's War Machine way. But it's basically, you have to be within 1 inch of someone in your squad, and there can't be more than 6 inches between, at the furthest point between the furthest 2 members in the squad. So you're basically trying to stay inside a 6-inch template. It's a bit like being on a movement tray without being on a movement tray, and I almost feel like movement trays would be a popular way of doing things here, or just having a gauge even. But model placement isn't super important in this game from what I can tell. It's with your, if you're within 1 of somebody, then you're engaged, but line of sight can be a bit messy, I guess, if you wanted to put them on movement trays. So it kind of like is the best of both worlds of having stuff stay relatively close together and having some, not restricted movement, but having some, you know, you can't gamify it, you can't like string yourself out into a line, but also have sort of that like freedom of placement where you can stick them in a trench, or you can have them occupy various beats of cover and stuff like that. Single models also exist, as do vehicles and monsters and things, and you get some basic ideas for your reach and basing. So then we've got the unit profile, which starts with your pace, how many inches you can move during a turn, your martial skill, which is used for shooting and melee. Basically, it goes low, medium, high. Low, you're hitting on a 1 or 2. Oh, and also, sorry, dice roll mechanics in this. You always want to roll low for a test. Low is good. You're hitting on a 1 or a 2 with low, 1, 2, 3 for medium, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 for high in melee. That's the general sort of like stat spread. Is you go from like a 1/3 chance up to a 2/3 chance for landing a hit in melee. I get your zeal, you're trying to roll equal to or under that. That's kind of like your morale, although morale checks are a slightly different thing for melee. You're rolling equal to or under that on a d10. And then your model count is also, it's wounds if you're a single model, it's model count if you're a unit. So this would be an infantry unit, like a section, 8 models in that unit. They're effectively the wound count of that unit. They don't differentiate between wounds and models unless the unit is like a single thing or a monster. And then you've got the last one, which is your saving throw, and that's what you're trying to roll equal to or under on a d6 typically. So a 2 would be you're rolling a 1 or a 2 to save. And that's it. You get your keywords, your infantry, that'll trigger certain effects throughout the course of the game, or can you occupy something like terrain. And then line regular, that's for your unit composition. The basic unit composition of the game is pretty simple. You can have an unlimited number of line and like untrained troops. For every line unit, you can have an elite unit. For every, I think it's 3 line or elite units, you can have like a cannonade unit, just like an artillery piece, or a unique unit. So it's basically, it's kind of like the old 40K force organization chart. You have to have a certain number of X before you get Y. You got to eat your vegetables first before you get your dessert. And advantage and disadvantage. So this is a way of saying modifier. Advantage means you reduce the dice roll by that amount, and disadvantage means you add to the dice roll by that amount. So if you're at disadvantage 1, you'd be adding 1 to all your dice rolls to try and get under something. If you're at advantage 2, you'd be reducing them by 2. It's just a handy way of like having modifiers be universal as opposed to having them affect stats specifically, which could cause confusion. I actually really like that as a writing design thing. They sort of parse it out from being attributed to the stat line, and that way it can be universal if somebody's doing something, or even apply to a single thing, like you're at disadvantage to morale tests, or zeal tests, or you're at advantage to shooting tests, whereas it's not like applying to a stat, it's applying to like a skill. And then you have your cover. Basic cover will add 1 to your save. If you go all the way down to a trench, it lets you reroll saves because you're like putting your head down. So when you're only saving on 1s and 2s for infantry, that's kind of handy. And then you got battle shock tests, and these are trying to roll equal to under your zeal. They can happen very often when you take damage or when you fail morale, when you're forced to fail morale checks from like melee results and stuff like that. You can be broken and chased off the table. And that leads to combat stress. You can get combat stress markers for a ton of different reasons. You have a maximum of 3, and you have to make a combat stress test usually for every one that you have. Monsters and single models, like big heroes, can also gain combat stress, but instead of dying from combat stress, they can be lamed, trembling, or shaken. It basically represents how like freaked out they are. You can also be pinned. Certain types of weapons can cause pinning, like machine guns and stuff like that. But that's a whole separate like trait from combat stress. Combat stress is basically, are you going to run? Are you removed as a casualty because you just flat out leave the fight? Or become like catatonic. And then you can also stress out your unique models, like your witch and your captain, to take additional actions, because they can activate more than once per turn, whereas most units can only activate once per turn. But doing so will give them combat stress and cause them to get damaged and stuff too. And we get the order of play. So these are just all the terms, like what's a round, what's a close combat subphase, then the compulsory move, then your phases, turn, activation, activation dice, command tokens, skills, priority activation, keywords, and activation keywords. These are all just the triggering things for in here. So first, the phase order, the command phase, players can attempt to manifest creatures. You gain manifestation dice by rolling doubles in your ritual tests, but also if you win a combat or people like die, monsters get attracted to the table through that, which is kind of cool. Then the compulsory combat subphase, if you're already in combat and you're fighting, you trigger to fight again there. Compulsory moves, if you're like some kind of monster or frenzied. Cannonade phase, all the guns go off. Then the elites phase, all the elite units get to activate before any of the line units, and then finally the line units, they get to be activated afterwards. So every start of each of these phases, you're going to roll activation dice. Like you're going to barter basically your dice. You're going to have your pool that you generate at the start of the turn during the command phase, and you're going to secretly say, this is how many I'm going to put down, and then reveal them at the same time, and then roll those dice and try and get the highest result to gain activation during that phase. So there's a barter system for who's going to go first, so that was kind of cool. That's just competing for round priority. Generating a command token, you get one for having a whole force, so people above half. Your captain's still alive, you get one. You get one for each regular unit you have. One command token per round if unit's within 6 of an enemy, provided that unit's not broken, and 2 command tokens per round if the unit is in close combat. So you gain additional dice for being in melee. Then your support, 1 command token per enemy unit pinned by this unit in the preceding round, provided that unit's been neither broken or destroyed. So if your machine guns lay down fire and pin somebody, you can get additional command dice tokens for doing it. So your performance will also dictate how many of those you have to spend on things and do things. What happens in the command phase? You can do your abilities for your captain. Your witch can do rituals and stuff like that. What happens in the close combat subphase? You fight in combat if you're already in combat. What happens in the activation phase? Cannonade, elite, and line. You're going to barter off to see who's going to activate units first. You're going to go back and forth with all of your units of that type activating. And like I said, your activation keywords are unique, cannonade, elite, and line. They'll be all in your unit profiles. And then things you can do, you can rest to drop combat stress, you can charge to get into melee, it's the only time you can get into 1 inch of another unit, move twice your pace, you can use an ability if you have any, like your witch and your captain might have some, unique units might have some, and you can shoot. And all of these include a move typically as well, where you can move your pace at the very least. You can only be activated once unless you're unique, and in that case you can activate more than once, but you gain combat stress, like I said before, and here's a little handy breakdown of it all. I do really like the art in here. It's got a great sort of like moody color scheme to it, and I think it really fits. And again, I love these little callouts. Basics of movement, I'm not going to go too deep into this. You move your pace, you have to maintain cohesion and stuff like that, but it does a good job of describing it all. And then your dice generation, so when you attack, you get dice based on your class typically. So if you are full strength, you're going to get your attack dice equal to your zeal. So like that infantry unit we saw before would have 6 attack dice if they're fighting in close combat, because that's their zeal. If they had more than half strength when they're attacking in close combat, then they get -1 to their zeal, half strength -2 to their zeal, less than half strength, attack dice equal to half your zeal to round it down, or 3 fewer attack dice, whichever is the least. And then if you're the sole survivor of 1 person in a unit, you get 1 attack dice. And then your generation table for single models would be like a lieutenant, a witch, or a captain get 2 attack dice. A weapon team might get 2. It's just if you're a non-standard unit, you get it called out how many you're going to roll. And like I said before, your martial skill, 1s or 2s are hits, 3s to 6s are misses for low. Medium is going to be 1 to 3, 4 to 6 for misses, and then high is going to be 1 to 4, 5 to 6 for misses. So you go from 1/3 to half to 2/3 chance of hitting. Now, critical hit, anytime you roll a 1, it just bypasses your save. So every 1, I'm going to be good at this game. I'm rolling 1s on d6s. Those are critical hits, and they bypass saving throws. Otherwise, typically you get to try and roll a saving throw. You roll a d6 and roll under your save. Taking wounds, if you're a single unit, you take a wound. Otherwise, it's a model from your model count removed. And then close combat has a morale system where you start with your zeal, and then based upon the casualties, it's a lot like the old Warhammer Fantasy Battle morale system. For every casualty different, like let's say I did 2, you did 3, there'd be a difference of 1, I'd be -1 of my morale. And then you check, if it's equal to your zeal, you just keep fighting. Otherwise, like basically if you net it at 0, nothing happens, everyone keeps fighting. Then you gotta see what the differential was. And the differential could be 1 to 3, you keep fighting, 4 to 7, you're starting to get tired, 8 to 11, you're exhausted, but 12 or more differential, you're shattered and you start running away. And other things can add to that as well, based on the idea that like things around you start to flee, it'll cause you to have more panic, and vice versa. You can have a higher result, units in close combat with a higher morale. They can start to get manifestation dice. So if you beat up on somebody, they might run away, and you might start to get manifestation dice where you can call in big beasties later on, which is kind of cool. We're into the terrain rules. Shooting attacks, very simple. Same process basically for shooting. You're checking range and facing. It's a pretty basic shooting system. Difficult shots might be based on visibility. Can you see something? Which is why having that simple sort of like mechanic for model placement in a unit coherency is pretty cool. But then shooting tables aren't necessarily based on your martial skill, although in standard weapons they are. They can also be based upon things like what kind of gun do you have. Do you have a machine gun, a precision gun, or an anti-tank rifle? They're going to roll separately from just having a low to high skill. They can also generate other results like a critical hit for close quarter stuff. They can also have precision weapons that can generate critical hits, or near misses. Near misses give you pin counters that can pin you. And machine guns can also cause near misses on a miss. They only hit on a 1 or 2, but a 3 to 4 they cause a near miss, which also causes pinning. Every near miss is a point of pinning that you get put on you, where if you do get pinned because you fail your zeal test, then all of a sudden you cannot activate period for the rest of the turn. It just puts your head down. And we're into tanks. Rules for tanks, more rules for terrain and obstacles for those tanks and how that interacts. The skills, abilities, and rituals. So these are the things that your captain and your witch can do. So like manifest things, do rituals. And the rituals are all based on like your lodge. So you pick a lodge for your witch. Hermetic lodges. Rituals of the mother or the crone. The horned god. And they can be all kinds of effects like summoning fog, summoning mud, rain, bad weather. And then you can also do manifestations. So based on the manifestation dice that you have, you can summon creatures like a Snatcher, which is like a Kobold, a Brownie, or other imp-like creature. And you can see the higher it gets, like a Haunter, a Devourer, like a Hag, Troll, or other monster that eats things. Up to, let's say, a Crusher, which is Giants, Titans, or other things made of flesh. And then they manifest around your where there's combat. And they can also go to control, which can be bad. They can rampage and beat things up. And then so we're only about 100 pages in here. That was the core mechanics of the game for the most part, with like your orders for your captain, your rituals and stuff, more sort of like granular stuff for vehicles and movement, because you can get everything from like tanks to armored cars to other sort of like lighter vehicles. The keywords, so like if you have a keyword, it can give you traits and abilities sometimes. And then we're into creating a patrol. So like I said, the mission will dictate how many units you have. You always get your witch and your captain for free. And they're like individual unique units. When you build your units, you'll select them based on their like training level. So starting with Lion and Mindless, as many as you want. Elites, 1-to-1 for them. Cannonade, a selection point for 2 points of line units. So every 2 points you can have a cannonade unit. And then unique units, 1 selection point per 3 line units. So to have one of everything, you need at least 3 line units. So that could be up to 6 points of selection points. That could give you a unique candidate on top of that, and you probably wouldn't be getting an elite. So you're probably not getting it all in 10, but once you get to 20, you're pretty much getting to play with everything you want. Then you pick a faction, pick your lodge, and then see what your unit availability is going to be. And then you can have some faction-specific units based on like the nation that you're fighting for and who they were in the war. And also you can pick your zodiac sign for your captain, which gives you additional units, which I think is pretty cool. So like I'm a Leo, which means this captain has the battle keyword impetuous, but once per game a friendly unit within 10 may use the captain's zeal for their own battle shock test instead of their own. That tracks. I'm impetuous. That feels right to me. And then you also can give them things like mounts and stuff, which are typically free, but bigger things like having a kelpie, which is the water horse. There was a Pixar movie about kelpies. It costs you a point if you want to do that. You can have bigger things too, like a Geetrash, huge black beast that shape changes, or a unicorn. Why not ride a unicorn? I mean, if I could ride a unicorn to work, I probably would. And then it's into like the rosters. So there's common units. These are all the common ones that anybody can take. Things like your captain and your captain upgrades, your infantry units. Cavalry captains, so you could have, or lieutenants rather, because you can have additional heroes to give orders and stuff too. Infantry section, right? So it's going to be the 8 model one that we saw in the beginning for your line units. Light machine gun crews, fire bottle teams. You can throw like Molotovs, rifle grenadiers, bombers. Anti-tank rifles, NCOs, everything you can think of, pretty much. And then we're going into colonial assault troops, British Empire and French Republic. So they'll have a tag on who can have them. So like sniper teams, no restrictions. Lancers would be British Empire, French Republic, German Empire, Free Corps, and Russian Empire only. I like that the Free Corps are in here because I played the Free Corps in Malifaux. And they were an actual thing. Mortar teams, processional groups. Now everyone can have one of those. You could have a 3.7 centimeter gun team. So like the French Republic, the German Empire, and the Russian Empire can have those. And it goes on. If you can think of a World War I like unit, you can probably have it in this game. Mindless units, things like the Harrowed. Yeah, zombies, sure, why not? Let's have some of those. And then Chapter 10, we go into the nation units. So like the French Republic can have Renault, FTTSFs. I don't know what that stands for. I think it's a flamethrower. Oh, sorry, it's a vehicle. It's a tracked vehicle. Theosophist, which is your captain type, replaces your captain. Lighter, more vehicles for your line units. Well-protected engine, it's like an armored car. And it's lined, which is kind of cool. So you have a lined vehicle. Schneider, CA1. Vitiated Spirit. So you get like all kinds of sort of like nation-specific or nation-driven monster stuff too. German Empire. Tacticaire, which replaces your captain. An Armonist. A7V, which is like a tracked vehicle. Stabtruppen. A Guerrilla team. I think it's a sniper rifle. And then the British Empire. I like that the Lady of the Lake is the picture for the British Empire. That made me happy as soon as I saw that. She's going to give him Excalibur, which is pretty cool. But then she's also got a weird tentacle, which is probably not to be trusted. A Cunning Person is your unique unit. Or a Mesmerist for your wizard. The May Queens, I think is really cool. You can have your May Day, sort of like everyone's in midsummer flowers. And then the Free Corps, the mercenary sort of units, skin changers in the Free Corps, Weksta, I'm not going to try and pronounce that, Ahari, as your lead choices. Anyway, if you can think of like a cool sort of like World War I diesel punky thing, and then you can have American Volunteer Legion units, mercenary captains, American Volunteers. If you can think of like a cool sort of like Fey thing, it's probably going to be in here. Trench Fighters, Rough Riders. I'm not going to go through every single unit because it's just going to take forever, but let's just show you an example of like a mission. And then upgrades, like your captain, you have an elephant gun, or the Very Pistol, a carrier pigeon, and scenarios. Okay, so choose a scenario, check your optional rules for what you're going to play in, like the extra manifestation dice for different weather and places. And here's the basic one, an engagement. So 6x4 table is what's recommended. Like I said, this is a full-size war game. And recommended up to 25 selection points per side. That's a pretty big game. You're looking at like 3 to 4 alliances, say 24, 25 models, 27 with your free ones, and then vehicles and tanks and stuff on top of that. You could have like 100 models on the table, easy for an engagement. You can have a maximum of 3 pieces of impassable terrain, a maximum of 8 pieces of like regular special terrain, and then no limit to the obstacles you can have. 12-inch deployment, and in victory conditions, lasts up to 6 full game rounds, with the victor being the last man standing, or the player with the most remaining selection points for the units in the battlefield. So not even like a scoring condition, it's just to the death. And then the rest of these are based upon typical sort of like World War I missions, like a trench raid, a smaller square table, a no man's recovery, no man's land recovery. So trying to pick up guys from no man's land. Oh, this is hard to turn. We're getting to the end here, so it's hard for me just to flip the pages. Defense, right? Someone's in the middle and having to defend their zone. The Big Push, like a Battle of the Bulge. And gas. And then your quick references in here with the keywords and stuff like that. Close combat tables. Credits. And then, of course, the illustrator's name was Dmitry Martinos. Very cool illustration. A blast template example if you need one. Along with the flamethrower template, you can photocopy and cut it out. And that's it. The War Transformed. So, things that weren't in here, a campaign system. This is very much a one-off war game. And I think the idea that it has mission-based unit selection probably gives you that. This is you're collecting a very specific World War I army in like a trench war, you know, like Fey horror kind of theme, which I very much like. I like that this is not another warband skirmish game from Osprey. They were kind of really deep in that. And they reprinted some of their classics, like they reprinted recently Dragon Rampant and Lion Rampant. Lion Rampant was the first one they did. But I like the fact that this is a full war game. I don't mind that there's not any campaign rules in here because I can come up with those on my own. But there's tons of unit selection, tons of like magical stuff, and tons of like mass combat stuff to dig into here. So this is kind of refreshing, I'll be honest. I like the theme. I like the fact that it includes like widgets and special rules for the units, like the tank, like that made from iron rule and stuff like that, that make it feel set in this setting and to this kind of like folk horror World War I sort of like, I guess like MacGuffin that's in the game. So well done. I think Frederick did a great job with this. I don't know when I'll be able to give this a try because obviously I can't put this on the table as fast as a normal game. This would require a lot of prep to paint like 100 World War I miniatures and find someone that wants to do it with me. I'm sure I have friends who would want to do it, and this would be a great excuse to paint some Perrys maybe. I think they have a World War I set. If not, then I'm sure Foundry does. I could paint some metal. Or even just find something cool from Matt at Knucklebones. All that 3D printed stuff that he's done too would probably look fantastic. And play some games. So there it is, A War Transformed. I'm excited about it. I think it's got some unique mechanics. It's a nice rules, like unit rules light setting, but there's tons of meat on the factions here to dig into and lots of modeling options too for the horror stuff. And I'm excited about the idea that it basically is like, it's a World War I game with a magic phase. I just think it's pretty cool. So yeah, we'll hopefully get on the table at some point in the future. Big thanks for watching. Textile Mash. Now we're gonna.
Hey folks, I hope you enjoyed that video, and thank you for watching. If you want to find out more about me and see what I'm up to, you can check me out on Facebook at facebook.com/outofthebasement-into-the-streets or Instagram at Guerrilla Miniature Games. You can also find me on Patreon at patreon.com/Guerrilla Miniature Games, and of course, you can now follow on Patreon if you don't want to back and see what's new. Thanks for watching.